Yes, thank you, Jan. Hi, everyone. I know this is like the first, I think, seminar or something after Christmas. I know everyone is still, recovering from the, nice days that we have had at home. Hopefully, relaxing. So I will take this seminar in a little bit of also light way. And I'm Antonio Martini. I'm associate professor at University of Oslo, but I'm also a researcher part-time at Chalmers. And this is about our new study that we are doing, like Jan said, and the participants are also Therese Besker and Jan Bosch. They are from Chalmers. So let me start with something. As I said, the title is "For a Few Dollars More, We Forgot Our Process." So I would start with "For a Few Dollars More," and you might know this movie. This is a movie, and this is the poster for the movie. It's actually an Italian movie. It was a co-production between Italy, Germany, and Spain. And it was then released in the US. It's from 1965, so it's pretty old. It's older than me, for sure. And this is the Italian title. And it's a spaghetti western. I don't know if you know. You probably know this movie. It was part of the trilogy. Actually, it's called the $3 trilogy. And there is like For a Fistful of Dollars before, and The Good and the Bad and the Ugly as the last one. So you might know at least one of these movies. And I tried to, it's also very famous also for its soundtrack. And I didn't know how to actually include the soundtrack here. So now when I actually try to play with my phone, I hope you will recognize it, hopefully. So I hope you have recognized this interesting soundtrack. It's part of my childhood, and I think a lot of people probably recognize this, which is it's a soundtrack from one of the best, soundtrack composer, which is Ennio Morricone, which is Italian. He passed away in 2020, not because of the COVID, but because he was very, very old. So why did I choose this movie? Now you're starting thinking, okay, what has this to do with all the rest? But just let me indulge a little bit on what this movie is about. You might recognize here one of very famous actor that was taking part in this movie, Clint Eastwood. So what's this movie about? It's about two bounty killers that wants to catch a psychopath criminal, which is pretty, let's say, in a sense, standard for a spaghetti western. So we have this guy who is the villain. He's basically like a person who is a psychopath. He's a criminal. He breaks out of jail, and by the end of the movie, he kills most of the people that he meets. So it's like the classic villain, right? He's very smart. And basically, he wants to keep some money that he has recovered after a robbing. This guy is like an anti-hero. He is called the Monco in Italian, but I actually understood that they changed his name in the English version. And the particularity of this guy is that he basically does everything with his left hand because his right hand is always on his gun, ready to shoot. So that's why Monco in Italian means exactly that you don't have a hand. So that's this guy. And then there is like a colonel who is trying to basically arrest the villain because he wants the reward. Both him and these two guys are trying to get their bounty killers. They want to get this guy because they want to get the money back and get the bounty from him, which is pretty high because this guy is pretty dangerous. It's basically a psychopath. Okay. How does it end? I'm not going to tell you the whole story about the movie. I recommend you maybe to watch the movie if you're interested, or maybe you remember. So basically how it ends, that's the interesting part. This guy gets killed, sorry for spoiling, but I guess we can sort of foresee this from the beginning. The interesting thing about the other two is that they kill him together, so they team up. And in the end, they get the money. And then there is a plot twist. So basically what happens is that this guy gets the money, all the money, bounties and money from the robbing and stuff. This guy doesn't, and it's not because he gets killed, but because he decides not to, which is a little bit of a plot twist, no? So what he says is that I just did this because of revenge. So I wanted this guy killed because he killed his daughter because he loved her, sorry. And why is that? Fine, go figure, that's a different story, but basically he just wanted revenge. He didn't do this for money. By now you really want to know what this is about and how does this have to do with software development and software center and everything. I can say don't do too many parallels. This talk is not about revenge in software engineering. This is not about psychopaths in software engineering. It can be interesting, I guess, at some point, but that's not what it's about. One thing that I wanted to point out is that these two guys have different value. So they do what they do, but they also have different motivation, and they have the outcome of this gave them different value. So let's start from that, and now let's maybe change a little bit the subject. And sorry for the hidden, marketing of Italian movies, but it's from the '65, so. So let's dive in a little bit on prioritization. So when we prioritize, we have a backlog, and we use different values to prioritize. For example, if you have a backlog and we have like 3 slots, and this is very simplified, of course, but we might have a lot of things that we want to fit into the backlog that we can't, and we have to choose. We have features, we want to fix bugs, we have architectural issues that we want to fix, we have process improvement, social issues. There is a bunch of different things that we would like to do, and we can't do all of them. And so different people also might decide to prioritize using different values and use different prioritization aspects. This is completely fictional, of course, it's not as it is, but some people might just decide to go for features and bug fixing. Other people might just would like to fix also architectural issues or process improvement or something else. So what happens? What happens when we have this situation? It's very difficult to prioritize in the right way. What do I mean in the right way? When we prioritize, there are suboptimal prioritization that generates what we call debt. I will go in a little bit to explain what that is. But basically, if we do a lot of features and bug fixing, this increases the value, of course, for our customers and everything, and we focus a lot on this. However, if we neglect stuff like technical issues like architectural suboptimalities or process lack of process or process suboptimality or social suboptimalities, we create a lot of what we call debt. These debts, in the end, in the long term, they decrease the value, and they actually impact how we provide the value to our customers. So I'm not saying that all the debts are important, because as we just mentioned, it's impossible to have everything to be prioritized, to be done. But there are some of them that might be more dangerous, and they might have like long-term or even medium-term consequences that are very important for the company. So it's important to focus on these few ones that actually needs to be prioritized. Here, how do I mean by, and why do we use this term debt? If you think about 2 credit cards, you might have like 2 credit cards on which you borrow money to buy stuff, and you have an interest. The interest can be low or the interest can be high. Now, of course, if the interest is low, it means that even if I keep that debt, I don't pay that much extra money. So this is not that dangerous. But if I have a high interest on what I paid, it means that every month I have to pay back a lot of money that I wouldn't have to if I didn't have the debt and I didn't use the credit card. So this is more dangerous, and it needs to be repaid. So in the same way, the same reasoning is we can use for our different tasks that we want to prioritize. And if we find that one of them is dangerous, for example, one specific process improvement, then the idea is that this should be also prioritized. Now, this is not easy at all, but that's what we actually are focusing on. As I said, there are different types of debt. There is technical debt, and that's something that we have studied actually over the last 10 years. This is actually the 20th sprint, and we are sort of concluding a little bit the project on technical debt that we have at Software Center. There is something like social debt that we haven't tackled yet. And then there is this process debt. There are also maybe other kinds of debt, but these three are like overall debts. And now we want to focus on process debt because we understood that it's something that actually matters. It lacks a little bit of processes or way of managing the process debt. And when we discuss also with the companies in this study, it seems that we need to do some more research on that. So why study that? First of all, we know from actual, a lot of studies from psychology and so on and so forth, that we as humans, we are not good at managing debt. And this is actually quite interesting. We tend usually to get rid of the smallest debt that we have because it's easier, right? You just take the smallest thing and then you repay. It doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't affect too much your wallet if you just remove a small debt. But usually we don't focus on the most dangerous or the ones on which we pay more interest. And these studies here, I mean, there is a collection of studies. I think this is an interesting read to do. Even the most financially savvy people from this study, they show that humans actually are not that good at intuitively manage debt. That means that we need a systematic way to think about it and to manage it. And that's what we're trying to do in this project. And in this project, after we have actually studied technical debt, we are focusing more on process debt. What is process debt? Now that you have heard all this, it's a bit abstract, technical debt, process. What actually is process debt? Let's make a quick example. Let's take the lack of synchronization between agile processes and a certification process. Let's say that we have an agile process, we have continuous delivery, and then we have a certification process which is in parallel to the agile one. And at some point we need some certification, some documentation for certification. So we have to explain how we actually did the software. So our software takes a stamps, gets a stamps, and it gets certified. What can happen here? It can matter that we have a team that actually follows the agile process, and at some point they need to produce this documentation. But hey, they actually maybe didn't know that well that this documentation was needed at this point in time, and then this documentation was not produced during the agile sprints. So what happens now? Now we have a problem because we have this interest. We didn't prepare this documentation. So maybe we have confusion and frustration because on this side, they are waiting for our documentation from the team. And from the team side, now they have to stop being agile and just produce a lot of documentation and give it to the stakeholders here. So this is not a place where one wants to be. And what's the problem here? Here, there is a lack of synchronization between these processes. So they were not well synchronized. So this is an example. I will not go through many other examples because we don't have that much time. And so we started to, after we identified some of these issues, we started a process debt study in 4 companies at the Software Center. And as a first thing, we actually have created a framework to understand what process that is and to talk about it and to communicate it. And we actually have published a paper already, which was published at this conference in December. I would have loved to go to Singapore, but as you know, it was not possible. But okay, I'm not going to report here this framework because it would take too long. So I will just share a few takeaways from what we found. 4 takeaways. One is that the value, the cost of change, and the interest, which is the cost of not changing the process if it's suboptimal, are keys to prioritize process debt. So we identify the variables that we need to understand and measure better to be able to prioritize the dangerous debt. Then process debt and its costs and values are related to time. Time is a very important dimension, like we will see very soon. Process debt is responsible for a lot of technical debt. This is also interesting. And then we just show a little bit of favorite mitigation strategies like check automation, visualization, and process reduction. This is something that we ask the participating companies which mitigation strategies they would like to do next, they would like to focus next and to do more. And these are the ones that were chosen the most. So let's go one. Let's just explain a little bit each of these takeaways. The key to basically understand what process debt to prioritize and to repay is to use the cost of change, which is intuitively obvious. So we want to understand how much it would cost to change a process that is not optimal. We want to understand also how suboptimal this is. If it's suboptimal, but it doesn't cause a lot of extra effort or extra negative impact, we don't really need to think about it. But if we don't change the process, if that becomes dangerous, that's something that we want to know, and we want to compare with the cost of change. So we want to understand if spending the money to change the process, it actually avoids something that is very expensive, because then we have a good return on investment. As a third thing, we want also, and this is something new, to get back to this value theme that I found in this movie from the 65s, from the 60s, is that the process value for stakeholders is also important. When we think about code, the value of the code is sort of obvious. We need to deliver the code to the customers, but we don't deliver the process to the customer. So the value of the process itself for the stakeholders, it's also a variable that we need to take in consideration. This is something new that we found in this investigation. So basically, we want to compare all these 3 things, and the idea is that we want to compare the outcome of this evaluation with features and other tasks to understand if a process that it's important to be prioritized, for example, instead to be fixed and to be allocated resources instead of basically doing other tasks like developing a feature or even fixing some technical debt or bug fixing and so on and so forth. So this is the first key. So these 3 variables are very important. And so we want to focus on this to understand how we can evaluate in a more systematic way and hopefully also measure this. The second point here is the process value, cost and change, and interest change over time. So what can happen is over time, the interest or the cost of not changing the process might actually grow, which means today I have a suboptimal process, but we don't have that many issues because of this. But later, in a few months or a couple of years, or I don't know, I can actually have higher extra costs because of this, because of my process suboptimality. Same for the cost of change. Maybe now it doesn't cost too much to change the process, or vice versa. I mean, this is an example. It can be the other way around. It could be that the cost of change actually goes down over time, but it could actually go up. And then if you have a high cost of change and high extra costs, we should probably think about this in time. The third thing is that the process value for stakeholders can actually change over time. It might be that now that the process does not have that much value for the stakeholders, but maybe later it can grow, or vice versa. Now it has a lot of value, but over time the process becomes less and less optimal. It gives less and less value, and then the value goes down. We can think about an example here from the interviews that we did, was that we had, for example, an infrastructure tool, which was like a software configuration management tool. And in the beginning, of course, this was chosen like several years ago, and it was very valuable because for versioning the systems and so on and so forth. But as the company moved to continuous delivery, then this tool and the use of it, which was embedded in the process, gave less and less value because it couldn't really support the continuous delivery process. So we need to understand when we think about this suboptimalities, they're not frozen in time, but they can change quite a lot over time. And then what we should do here is to understand when is the best moment to actually think about them and do something about them. For example, repaying the debt. For example, improve the process. So what is the key point here is that we need to continuously assess the process that we have to understand if these three variables are actually changing or they are going to change. So trying to predict, for example. And there is also another challenge that we discussed during our investigation, is that is the change rate. As we have more and more change rate of the process, but also of the new technologies and everything else, how can we actually make sure that all these variables, they don't move too fast, or if they move too fast, we need to catch up with them. Because if we change quite a lot every day, then these are going to change, and then suddenly we might have a lot of that we didn't have before. So we want to understand how to deal with the change rate and the process debt and the process improvements. As I said, one important thing is that we found that a lot of process debt, a lot of technical debt is actually caused by process debt. An example could be that we don't have a good process for having an architecture in place. So everything is done too upfront, or everything is done maybe too emerging, and we don't have enough upfront thinking about architecture. And then we have technical debt. We have a bad architecture because we didn't have a good process. So fixing the process debt could actually avoid a lot of technical debt. And this was actually something very interesting, also for the project related to technical debt that we found. Last but not least, we started investigating some mitigation strategies. How can we avoid, prevent, understand, and repay process debt and compare process debt? So we actually asked the participants in this study what they would like to do more in their organizations to prevent and manage process debt. And one was automating more the checks that one does to understand if the process is actually in place or not, to prevent dangerous divergences if the process is optimal. And then with the process visualization, it was important to understand and communicate if there are gaps in the process. And one of the best ways to do that is to actually visualize the process and say, look, this is what happens, and here it's obviously the gap. It's much easier to explain, for example, to someone who has to decide if this process needs to be improved. And then finally, process reduction, which was an interesting one. We actually understood that one of the problems is not just having a good compliance with the process, but the process itself might be suboptimal, and sometimes it can be just too heavy. We have some examples of this, and one interesting example was that at some point, to make a process better, actually one role was totally taken away from the process because it was just making it too complex. Okay, so I think I shared 4 main things that we found in this. We are looking into this process. We discuss a little bit of movies as well, which is nice after Christmas, I guess. What are we going to do in the next steps? We during the spring, both of them, we will have a series of cross-company sessions and presentations in which, as the companies themselves, they explain, they would like also to share what they are, what real process that are there and how to fix them. So we will organize such sessions, very practical sessions, and we will try to understand more about these variables and these 4 takeaways that we will try to follow up on those 4, especially on those 4 topics. And of course, there is still place for companies to join. So if you want to join this study, just contact me. And then I thank you from me, from Therese, and from Jan